Welcome to the training. Today we're doing FBA, functional behavior assessments. This is how we're going to figure out what's going on with problem behaviors. Many times we get called into a case. The first step is to really, of course, to sign the consent paperwork and everything like that. But the first actual ABA step here is doing the functional behavior assessment. And the functional behavior assessment is a process that is ongoing, that it never is over. We are constantly figuring out what is going on with behaviors we are working on. We're figuring out the function, we're figuring out baseline data. And that's what this training is going to be all about, functional behavior assessment. So let's get into the steps. And let's take a look at what the FBA is all about. So they show you this pyramid, and this pyramid, I think, is from the Cooper book.
Mhm.
And we want to look at the base or the foundation of the pyramid first. And the first thing we have to think about is indirect functional assessments. So this is when we are interviewing caretakers, we're doing checklists, our rating scales like our QABF, our open interview form, the FBA interview form, and we're gathering that information through interviews and through indirect means, through interviews and talking with staff, talking with the people that know the BIP best. After that, that's just not good enough. We don't want to rely on that information, and we'll get into why in a little bit. But then we're going to move up the pyramid and do a descriptive functional assessment or a direct functional assessment where we are going to go out and do observations. We're going to look to see what is happening now. And another good practice here is to do ABC data, that we're going to record on the data using our ABC data forms, which is a great form ongoingly for problem behaviors that we want to have in place for all our VIPs that have problem behaviors or challenging behaviors. We want to make sure we have that ABC data collection going, that we're recording on the antecedent, the behavior and consequences of problem behaviors. And then finally, there is a top portion of the FBA process called the functional analysis. And in this, it's in a very controlled setting where a trained clinician will put different conditions in place to test the function of problem behaviors to almost prove that a certain problem behavior is reinforced by a certain consequence. So you could check out videos online about functional analysis. We never take it that far. We end at direct functional assessment at reaching beyond limits. So let's get into each step, and we'll talk a little bit about the FBA. So why do we do an FBA? Why do we do an FBA? Well, we're going to determine the function of the behavior of concern. That's what we're doing FBA. We're trying to come up with that hypothesis statement about why behaviors are occurring. And why are we so concerned about the function of behavior? Why are we so concerned about that? Why is that so important?
Well, I know just from experience that it could help us guide what kind of interventions we're going to use. If we know what maybe the function's happening, maybe we could try to meet that need in a different way.
Yeah, exactly right. So when we determine the function behind behavior, we could fine tune our strategies and our interventions and our goals in order to help teach a new behavior, perhaps. So it's so important that we know that function. It also helps us individualize strategies based on the function rather than just having a one size fits all approach to treatment, which is probably not a good way to go about it. Interventions based on FBA may be more effective than those selected without consideration of behavior function. And like I said before, it's an ongoing process. So we're always analyzing problem behaviors and trying to figure out the function, trying to see how often it's occurring now. As new behaviors emerge or change, functions can change. So this process is never over. It's important that during the FBA, we're gathering baseline information or how often behaviors are occurring right now. And why is it so important to gather this baseline information, especially during this FBA process?
So you can see whether your interventions are working.
Yeah, so we can have that comparison, right? So we could see when we put interventions in place that it was the intervention that changed the behavior, and also that we're making meaningful change in the VIP's life, right? So if we didn't have that baseline phase, we would be kind of lost to know if we're making improvements with the behavior or not. And if we're not, we wouldn't know to make a change to our interventions. There was an interesting example in one of the books I read that was like, okay, this student was calling out in class, And they were calling out 60 times the BCBA gathered during this class session, 60 times. And they implemented interventions. She determined the function behind the behavior, put in interventions, and the BCB went out a week later and counted that the behavior is happening 40 times now in that session. Well, the teacher approached that BCBA and said, hey, the behaviors didn't stop. It's still happening. It's still going on. And the BCBA referred to the data and said, well, look, there's been a 20 score of 20 reduction of that behavior happening, which would have been impossible for that teacher to recognize if it wasn't for the data being collected. So gathering baseline information is paramount to our work because we could be making these subtle gains that might have been hard to see if we didn't collect data. Okay, so make sure we are collecting that baseline information and comparing it when we put interventions in place and making changes based on the data. If things aren't going in the right direction, we're meeting for supervision or we are making changes to our interventions. And we're going to consider the antecedents behind the problem behavior, the behavior of concern, and also the consequences or what is maintaining this behavior. Okay. So there's an example for you guys. We have Thomas. Some of you guys have seen Thomas many times. Some of you guys might be new to Thomas. But we have a Thomas biting. And Thomas, we get called in because he's biting. And we find out that during our FBA process that Thomas is biting to get items, tangible items, like his iPad, his Beats Pro Max. What kind of interventions might we choose for Thomas if he's engaging in behaviors to get items?
Offer him an item before he starts biting.
Okay, that could be a good doing this time-based schedule, trying to suppress that problem behavior. We're going to offer that item beforehand. So good idea, Joanne. So, but how would our interventions be different if we determine he was biting to escape demands?
Teach him to take a break.
Okay, yeah, we're going to teach them to maybe request a break, right? So do you see all of our interventions are vastly different depending on the function of behavior, even though the behavior is exactly the same? So I really want you guys to play close mind to that, especially if you start working with a lot of people and they have very similar behaviors. The behaviors could be occurring for vastly different reasons and require vastly different interventions in order to be successful. Thank you, Joanne.
Sure.
So what are the steps of the FBA process? We're going to gather information with indirect and direct assessments, which we'll talk a little bit more about. We're going to interpret information from the indirect and direct observations. We're going to create a hypothesis statement, and we're going to develop interventions based on the function of problem behaviors, and that's through your supervision meetings and your own experience. So let's start with the indirect assessment. And this is kind of our foundation of the pyramid, the very lower portion of the pyramid. And this is where we kind of start typically. So these include our structured interviews, checklist, rating scales, record review, where we are going in, looking at past records that could help us develop our behavior support plan. Questionnaires to obtain information from those who are familiar with the person exhibiting the problem behavior. Now, just remember that this indirect assessment is very unreliable. The information we gather during this process is very unreliable in nature. And think about it. If I asked someone that was close to you, what are some things Joanne likes? Are they going to be right 100% of the time about what Joanne likes? No, they won't be. And I think about like maybe an embarrassing story, like with your parents, and like someone asks your parents what you like, and they tell that person that you like something like Pokemon. And you're like, Mom, I haven't liked Pokemon in 15 years. Right? So we know that this indirect information is very unreliable in nature, but we use it, but not to say, and I don't want to discount it that much, that we're not going to utilize it because it's important. Because during this indirect phase, we are getting an idea about what is happening. It is kind of training our brain to focus in on potential problems that could be happening with our VIP. And also it's going to train our brain and prepare us for the direct assessment. So when we go into the direct assessment, we kind of have some lenses to look through, or like what we're there to do, what we're there to look out for, and what we're there to help out with. So the indirect assessment is kind of setting the stage for us to go out and do that direct assessment. Okay. So we're kind of taking the information in the indirect, and here's some examples. We're taking that information from the indirect, and we are going to use it now in the direct assessment. And I like to think I'm going to prove what I've learned in the indirect assessment during the direct assessment, that I'm going to go out and see these behaviors for myself and actually determine if they are a problem or not. Right? And we've had many cases where there was problem behaviors reported upon during the indirect phase that are not currently occurring with the VIP, that we have determined during this direct assessment piece. So no, and then we would not include that in our behavior support plan, a behavior that is not currently happening. So direct assessments encompass direct observations of behaviors under naturally occurring conditions. I'm remembering all the information given to me during this indirect phase, and I'm going out to see it for myself. I'm going out to see it for myself, and I'm also collecting data during this time, like ABC data recording, a continuous recording, or ABC narrative or scatter plot recordings. You know, any kind of data recording that you're doing yourself is considered a direct assessment. Any data collection that someone else is giving you is an indirect assessment. So hopefully we could go out and we can prove that what's being reported in the indirect phase is actually still a problem. What else are we doing during this direct assessment? Are we just taking the information from the indirect, or are we doing something more here?
Collecting the ABC data.
We're collecting the ABC data, definitely. We're doing that. We're collecting ABC data to determine that baseline. What else are we? Go ahead,
I was going to say, like a good combination of both of them, kind of taking the indirect data and also seeing things for ourselves to see if it really is, you know, what they say it is, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I think recognizing ourselves, maybe skill deficits or other problem behaviors that are happening with our VIP, right? So it could be things that aren't even being reported to me in the indirect phase, that through my experience and my expertise, I've recognized to be a skill deficit or a problem behavior occurring that I've witnessed or collected information on during this direct assessment piece. One thing I like to think about when I'm trying to identify goals is when I'm doing my direct assessments, I am kind of observing, of course, on problem behaviors, but I'm also observing where the staff may be providing, or stakeholders, intrusive prompting, right? If I see a staff providing intrusive prompting in the form of like physical assistance or even verbal prompting, I could identify that as a potential goal to fade. Sorry, a potential behavior to fade, as far as the prompting goes. So I'm gonna slowly help build this person independence if it's important to them. So I'm not only taking the information from the indirect, but I'm also identifying things through my own experience where this VIP might benefit from my work with them. Does anyone have anything else to add to indirect or direct assessments? Okay. So here's some examples of direct assessments when the clinician is doing it themselves. We have it looks like an interval recording for non-compliance and hitting, so it must be partial interval recording. And then we have an ABC data sheet here with the antecedent behavior and the consequences. And guys, the ABC data sheet is a great sheet to use ongoingly. When I go out, I always carry ABC data sheets in my bag. I'm always bringing them out. I'm always having a discussion. I'm always collecting them for my VIPs. This is a really important piece. And remember, ABC data is just for problem behavior. ABC data is just for problem behavior, and it's an ongoing data collection tool that we could use. I could turn this into data. I'm going to enter into Central Reach. I'm also going to see what the consequences are maintaining problem behaviors. And I could also see those antecedents, or what's happening before the behavior, to really guide my practice, really guide the interventions I'm working with. And the ABC data sheets should be a sheet that you guys are using for each one of your VIPs that are having challenging behaviors. It's kind of like our tool here that we're going to use to ongoingly assess and evaluate our work with this VIP. And especially at the onset of a work with them, it's so important that we are trying to determine that behavior function. So then we move on to our hypothesis statement. And the hypothesis statement is kind of a statement that we're going to use to develop treatment interventions. It is going to determine the function of, it's going to kind of tell the person reading and also direct our interventions, because we are going to kind of make a statement about why behaviors are happening or the function of behavior. So there's a couple of terms in this slide that we kind of need to know about. The one thing about the hypothesis statement is the term called socially mediated or automatic. Okay, what does that mean to you? Socially mediated or automatic? If I said this behavior is being maintained by something socially mediated, what does that mean?
Does the behavior provide its own function, or is someone else reinforcing it?
Yeah, great. So you answer both of them. So is the consequence being delivered through the behavior itself, through the person engaged in the behavior itself, which would be an automatic function? Or is the consequence being delivered through someone else? And that would be a socially mediated. So can you give us an example of both? Or one?
So for automatic, I mean, it could provide its own benefits. So something like eating, you could if you're going to if they're going to crave something and they know that, I feel good when I eat something, they're going to continuously take something that they like and eat and want to eat.
Okay, yeah, so good. Yeah, so eating, is automatically reinforced, especially if we're engaged in that eating behavior ourselves, and likely to occur again in the future. Food is in that unconditioned reinforcer. It's reinforced. It provides reinforcement to everyone, every organism. Okay, great. So that's an automatic reinforcement. The consequence isn't being delivered through anyone else. It's being delivered through our own behaviors. And what about socially mediated?
I always think of attention for this one.
Okay.
Attention from, or I raise my hand, I need a teacher to call on me to provide the answer, or I get attention from a peer in school by acting out.
Yeah,
Things like
so
that.
attention has to be socially mediated, right? That consequence is being delivered through someone else, right? That's what this is all about. So the hypothesis statement really is honing in on the consequence, right? That's kind of what we're very interested in. Why are we so interested in the consequence again?
The consequence of what maintains the behavior. That's what keeps things going.
Yeah, so that's the reinforcement. That's the piece that we're very interested in. So we have socially mediated or automatic. We also have to consider positive and negative. We really have to know what these two terms mean when we mention ABA. So what do we mean by, and again, this is about the consequence. This is all about the consequence. So what do we mean by positive? Someone I haven't heard from. What do we mean by positive? Is it good?
All right, that's what I remember when I first started in this field. I was really like confused. I'm like, oh, positive is good and negative is bad. And I'm like, no,
I mean, that makes
positive.
sense.
It does. I mean, that's what we've been taught. I mean, that's what I know for the longest time. But really, it's more like the science base. So positive is an addition to the environment, like a stimuli. Negative is, and then taking something away.
Right, yeah. So positive is something added to the environment in the consequence section, like attention, a tangible item. Food is in Joe's example. And negative reinforcement is something taken away, right? And if it's negative reinforcement, I always want to make sure there's a adversive antecedent happening in the environment that is being removed by the behavior. So we have an example here, and I'd love to hear from someone I haven't heard from today. Can you give us an example of a socially mediated positive reinforcement behavior? Give us an example of what that might be.
Well, I think like Brandon said, attention's probably the big one. That's the first one that comes to mind.
So what kind of
Yeah, for
behavior might
sure.
lead to attention?
Like your example, the student calling out, when that student calls out, everyone's attention is on that student.
Very good. Yeah. So the attention is added to the environment. If we see that calling out happening again and again, we could determine that that behavior is becoming reinforced. So that is positive reinforcement. Appreciate your participation, Carrie. That's very good. So the next one is automatic negative reinforcement. So what could this behavior look like that is being reinforced through automatic negative reinforcement? What are we thinking about?
I like to think of an itch on my nose.
Scratching an itch on your arm. Oh,
Oh,
Brandon, quit.
sorry. We
Quit
typed right before I
answering the
did.
questions.
Yeah, right. I'll just leave. No,
No,
that's
I'm
definitely
just kidding.
that's a good one.
Okay, so you have an itchy sensation, an antecedent,
Mm.
probably adversive to most all of us to have an itchy itch like that. As we were talking about it, I'm getting very itchy on my head.
Like, what's going on?
And
Yeah,
when I
lice.
scratch it, it provides that relief. So think about negative reinforcement as kind of reinforcement through relief. And in the future, when I feel that itchy sensation, I'm likely to scratch it again. That itchy feeling is taken away, providing that automatic negative reinforcement. And again, it's automatic because the behavior that I'm engaged in is providing the reinforcement. I don't need to access the reinforcement through someone else. Now, what if I had the same behavior, but the itch was on my back? How would that change things?
You need to get a back scratcher.
That's right. Well, if I got a back scratcher, yeah, that would be automatic. I could ask someone else to scratch my back, maybe socially mediated. Sue, you'll do that for me? I will never ask you to do something like that.
What happened?
I thought you were raising your hand. All right, let's go. So the hypothesis statement, guys. Anything else to add about the hypothesis statement? Do we understand what we're doing here? Based on this information, we're going to develop treatment strategies based on the function behind the behavior. Socially mediated, automatic, positive, and negative. What function do you think would be easier to work on? A socially mediated behavior or an automatic behavior? From someone I haven't heard from.
Automatic.
Yeah. So you think automatic would be easier?
Yeah, because I feel like with socially mediated, you might have to deal with the family or other people, and that's more variables to manage.
Oh, good point. I think that's a fair point. That's very difficult. Hannah, I agree with you. What could be a reason why automatic might be more difficult, though?
They could engage in the behavior by themselves.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of control, perhaps, on the reinforcement. If this person's alone in their room, they could be engaging in this behavior without the potential for us to intervene. So automatic reinforcement is typically a harder, more difficult behavior to work on due to the reinforcing potential of the person engaging in the behavior just all the time, whenever they want. And socially mediated, I think you're right, Hannah, that it is very difficult sometimes, especially when we working with the VIP at the program and there's tons of staff there. Then they have a driver, and then they go home and they have staff at their house to get everyone on the same page. So I think both of them could be equally difficult. So, and you know, our strategies change dramatically based on these subtle changes. Okay. So we have this baseline graph. Here we have a behavior of hitting, property destruction, self-injury, and the first part of the graph is the baseline phase. Okay, and I'm sorry for the crude graph, and I know we use Central Reach now, that it makes a much cleaner graph than this. But we have three behaviors we are considering here, and this is for the lesson. And the first part of the first lines are the baseline phase. So we have three behaviors. We have hitting, property destruction, self-injury. It looks like self-injury is heading down. We have property destruction going up, or sorry, hitting. The colors are so similar. We have hitting going up, and then we have property destruction maintaining. So if we see this on our graph, we're collecting data in our first couple sessions with our VIP, and we see that these effects are happening during the baseline period. We were reported during the indirect that these behaviors are happening. We go out to the direct steps. We are looking at the behaviors, how often they're happening now. And we are seeing if they are, we see this demonstrated on our graph. What behaviors might you choose to work on in your behavior support plan based on this data? And you might not know.
Hitting.
I was
Hitting.
hitting because it's going up.
Okay, hitting because it's going up. So we're seeing an increase in hitting. And we determine if we see this effect on the graph, this graph goes up over time, what effect is happening to this behavior?
It's increasing.
Yeah, which is another word for? Starts with an R.
It's being reinforced.
Yeah. So when we use the word reinforcement, guys, this is what we mean, right? This is what we mean, that over time, the behavior is increasing. So if we have a problem behavior that over time is increasing, it probably is in need of special interventions. So probably a good behavior to select in your behavior support plan. Now, how about property destruction? What kind of effect do we see there happening with the fours going across? What's happening here?
If I could see it correctly, it looks like it's at baseline. It's stable.
Yeah, so it is stable. It's maintaining, right? It's not going up or down, Sean. You're right about that. So what effect is this? What effect is this demonstrating to us?
It's maintaining.
It is maintaining, which is another word for?
Remaining baseline.
Yes, it
It's
is a
being
baseline.
reinforced. It's still being reinforced.
Yes, it's another example of reinforcement, guys. Right? So these two examples, this behavior increasing, this behavior maintaining, are both examples of reinforcement. So when we say the word reinforcement, this is what we mean. That's all we mean. We don't mean anything else. We mean this behavior is continuously occurring over time. It is not going down. It is either increasing or maintaining. So would you choose these behaviors in your behavior support plan to work on? Would you say?
I mean, there's always for progress, right? I mean,
What was that?
there's always room for progress.
Yes. And since these behaviors are being reinforced and they're problem behaviors, look, we have hitting here, we have property destruction. These are going to hinder the VIP's access to environments. They're going to lead to a lesser quality of life. And these are behaviors that are happening continuously over time. These are behaviors that we need to target in our behavior support plan because they're a problem. They're problem behaviors and we've demonstrated they're becoming reinforced. So these are absolutely behaviors that we need to choose in our behavior support plan. Now we have this behavior here, which is self-injury, which is a very serious behavior. But during our baseline phase, what do we see is happening here? What do we see? Sorry, I didn't hear you, Joanne.
It's decreasing.
It's decreasing, which is the opposite of reinforcement, right? And we use the term punishment here, that this behavior has led to not anything bad or malicious we're doing with this person, just that the behavior is being reduced over time, which is the opposite of reinforcement. So when I determine this effect's happening, I'm not going to add this to my behavior support plan. There is no need to add self-injury to my behavior support plan because it's already naturally being reduced over time. Without doing this baseline collection, I am unable to determine what behaviors are actually a problem and what behaviors I shouldn't touch with the 10-foot pole. Because this behavior is naturally being reduced. I don't need it. I just say, keep doing what you guys are doing. It's already being reduced over time. These other two behaviors are the problem that we need to address in the behavior support plan. So your baseline data is really critical here to tell you what behaviors you should choose in your behavior support plan. Because I don't want to waste a lot of time and energy working on this self-injurious behavior when it's already being reduced. It's good to go. And I've shown that on my graph. These other two behaviors are the problems that we need to work on. I put this intervention in place. I guess we're going to teach them the request. And we see that when we do, the self-injury zeroed out, which is great. We have a reduction in this property destruction behavior, which is great. But look, we continuously show that hitting is increasing. So this hitting, we need to look into. We need to check this out and determine why this behavior is continuously increasing. What are the potential reasons why this could be happening, do you think?
Being reinforced.
Yes, that's definitely happening. It's being reinforced. And maybe we were wrong about the function for this particular behavior. Maybe our interventions weren't the best. This request intervention wasn't the best intervention for this particular problem. Maybe this is occurring for a totally different function that I didn't pick up on. And it's okay to be wrong as long as you're collecting data and doing their processes the right way. Because now I could pick this apart right away and come up with new interventions, talk to a BCBA again, and determine making some subtle changes to my interventions in order to help with this behavior as we move forward. Without this graph, without this data collection, I would be lost to do any of this. I wouldn't know what to do. And I wouldn't know if I was actually helping the situation or hurting the situation. What questions do you guys have about baseline collection or using this graph? I like ABA because it doesn't use these complex formulas. All ABA does is look at if the behavior is going up, maintaining, or going down. And we're making changes based on that simple idea. I love that personally. It's so easy. What questions do you guys have about the visual analysis in ABA, if any? Okay. Well, make sure you guys are collecting data and then putting it on the graph and actually evaluating, taking a look, seeing what's happening, making treatment decisions based on what's happening in your graph. So we're going to have a recap now. We're going to collect data on the ABCs of behavior and complete the FBA, which is the indirect and direct phases. We're going to determine the function of the behavior by developing a hypothesis statement that we will then create interventions on. And again, we are reviewing our charts, we're reviewing our graphs to determine what actually is the problem here, what actually is happening here, and what actually is the problem. We're going to then meet with BCBAs, and through our own expertise, we're going to develop behavior plans based on the function of that behavior. Here are my references for today's training. What questions do you guys have about the FBA process?
I'm good, Mike.
You're great, Joanne. All right, guys. Well, it was a pleasure to speak with you guys this morning. If you guys have any questions or anything comes up, I'm only a Teams message away. Never hesitate to reach out. It's great to see everyone. Great to talk to everyone this morning. I hope you have a great Wednesday. Thank you for attending.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Mike.
good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.